Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys the full spoilers from the upcoming Boruto 2 Blue Vortex manga chapter. Spoilers dropped late last night / early this morning, depending on where you guys are located at, and your OBC, your original Boruto chief, has a lot to go over in this one. We have Mamushi inside of Konaha. The answer behind Sarada and Sumire's immunity to omnipotence is confirmed now. We got characters getting new power-ups and so much more happening in this chapter. The chapter officially drops on the 20th this month, and the chapter review should be out by then. So I thank you in advance for your patience and your understanding. We don't care about having the first chapter review up for Boruto so much as maintaining the quality you guys have gotten for the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter reviews, which big shouts out to Salad Bolts and Kaz over on Twitter for, as always, we'll touch on some of the major stuff in the leaks, and for things that I want more context on, or I wish to get a difference of opinion or more clarity on translations, since Japanese to English is not a word-for-word translation like you have like in, say, Spanish to English. A lot of Japanese stuff is at the discretion of the translator. For things like that, I'm going to save for the review itself. So if you don't hear me go further in depth on something, that is why. Also, don't forget to check out my Anime Explained channel where I discuss other anime like My Hero and Demon Slayer, and other manga like the new Chainsman chapter review that I will leave linked in the description box. Really showed my ass on that chapter review, not literally. The same with my Everything One Piece Explained channel, where I do lore videos on One Piece like my new Ace video, and I blind react to every chapter of One Piece from chapter 1 to the new chapter as a brand new reader who's never been spoiled. So jumping right into it, the first thing we have to look at is Mamushi has officially come to Konoha, and he's appeared faster than previously expected. At first, we were told that he was on the move and it could take up to a couple of weeks, but for unseen reasons, potentially the horny powers that he got from looking at the dirty magazines last chapter, he's pulled up in Konoha, and ladies and gentlemen, we have our first glimpse at one of Mamushi's powers, and this one appears to be a Shinjutsu adjacent of Madara's Limbo clone powers that Madara has via the Rinnegan, which is a reminder, every ninjutsu has a Shinjutsu version that is out there. So Mamushi is able to make copies of himself that retain his full attack power, just like Limbo, but there are downsides to his power as explained by Kashin Koji, and I'm fascinated by this jutsu. On one hand, when he makes clones of himself, they don't have the drawbacks that making shadow clones do, where with shadow clones, you split your chakra evenly between yourself and the number of clones you make. So say you make 3 shadow clones. Each clone in yourself has 25% of that overall chakra, which chakra is used both for ninjutsu as well as for amping up your physical stats, and has the drawbacks in that most people don't have chakra pools that are large enough to perform the multi-shadow clone jutsu safely. Hence, Hashirama made the jutsu that Tobirama created. He deemed it forbidden. And when Boruto first heard about how Mamushi's power works, he immediately chimed in with a low-key, sarcastic, smart-ass reply saying, "Oh, this is basically a shadow clone, right?" Which at that point, Ikimoto uses Kashin Koji to step in and basically indirectly give the audience a refresher on how shadow clones work, which to the people who commented under the shadow clone video I did and the short I did months ago saying, "Hey dummy, shadow clones don't split your chakra evenly," that's not true. Boruto's new chapter just reminded you, reread Naruto's manga. Similar to Limbo, this jutsu keeps clones at full power, but it has different weaknesses. Whereas the Limbo jutsu can only make 4 clones at full power, and we know they're at full power because of what's stated in the data book. Mamushi's Shinjutsu, they are completely limitless, meaning he could quite literally pull a Naruto and spam 1,000 of these clones, and they'd all have the same attack power and stamina, and they would have 0 chakra limitations. However, the downside to this is that the more clones that he makes, the more his intelligence drops. Basically, the more Mamushi uses it, the more he devolves into a mindless Ten-Tails that is operating off of sheer instincts, and the more clones he makes, the more that these clones feel a heightened sense of pain than they would feel if he was just there by himself. Also, the main body of Mamushi, even if it's tucked away somewhere else, it will be attracted to the number of clones he makes. think of it like a magnet. It's eventually going to pull him towards them, so he can't stay away for long. At some point, he will get there. The other weakness is that the eyes are the weak point here. So for 90s babies like me, which that should be about 40% of you guys here on the channel, think back to the OG Power Rangers, where you had to hit the center of the chest on the putties to take them down. For Mamushi, destroying the eyes, that's the key there. You have to destroy his eyes to basically start taking out these clones based on what we got for the translation. Now, this leads to Shikamaru concluding all they need to do is just lure all the Mamushi clones into one area and destroy them. However, due to the presence of Jura, they need to make sure that the battle will take place inside of Konaha, which is where things are going to get tricky for Shikamaru. On one hand, fighting in Konaha, it will prevent Jura from getting involved because Jura has a soft spot for the culture of Konaha, particularly the shinobi, particularly the books, particularly the sweets at the tea shop. But on the other hand, it means if Mamushi pops up sooner than expected like he did, you run the risk of Shikamaru being held responsible for yet another invasion of Konaha by an enemy combatant. The third in a short period of time, potentially 4 if you want to count Boruto, just given that the feudal lord views Boruto as an invader, and with lives being potentially lost, this will further have his role as Hokage called into question, especially with Kobu still inside the village, still investigating Boruto. The other thing that we get here is that there are some characters who are in line to get power-ups, multiple characters, and we're seeing one of them getting help directly from Kashin Koji, which I hope we get to see more this time of how Kashin Koji uses 10 directions to impart the knowledge of how the jutsu works and see the characters work to master it, since while personally that moment where we saw Boruto briefly training to learn flying Raijin was cool, I personally wanted to see a little bit more in that chapter when Kashin Koji was telling Boruto how to use it. But I'm not too sure we'll get that with this particular character just because they're not as important as Boruto. However, Boruto is seemingly taking a step ahead, and I love it for this reason. It's staying consistent with Boruto Uzumaki as a character in terms of how he's been written for a long period of time. He's following the Sasuke route in ways that I don't think enough people truly understand. So if you've been a long-time viewer of this channel, you know I've been saying for years now that Sasuke's character, as he was written in Naruto's manga, the whole character arc was patterned after a few famous samurai stories. Despite Naruto being a ninja story, Sasuke's character arc had an extremely heavy samurai influence, and that with Boruto, once he became Sasuke's student, very slowly the story began to incorporate aspects of samurai stuff into Boruto's character, including the current plotline of omnipotence with Boruto and Kawaki and Naruto. It's a literal retelling with tweaks made to the story involving the Minamoto clan, where the clan leader is betrayed and killed. The outside son banishes the heir of the clan, and the heir eventually comes back with an army to avenge his family and reclaim his birthright. There are parallels to the Naruto being, quote, dead, even though he's sealed away, Boruto being banished, and Kawaki being the fraudulent person that has taken the birthright. Well, Boruto, he gives his sword to Sumire, and he tells her that due to him being distracted in the Jura fight, his sword needs to be repaired. But he also gives her a scroll that will make the sword more powerful than before, to the point that Sumire warns him it will change the sword completely in nature. And she asks, hey, are you okay with this? Because that's technically Sasuke's sword, that's not Boruto's. And Boruto says Sasuke would not care because it will make the sword more powerful. This continues to build on what I said in the Boruto versus Jura chapter, where when that sword was nicked, I said that it was a reflection of Boruto still having to do what Sasuke said, refine his skills, and that mentally something happened to Boruto in the event of facing Jura that caused him to lose focus, hence the nick in the sword. Because in samurai culture and stories, the sword is a reflection of the user, in particular the state of mind of the user. Whenever you get chipped swords like that, there's symbolic reason behind it. So in those stories, a chipped blade, it comes from distraction, turmoil, lack of refined skill, and a soul that is tainted by violence and trauma, or the user facing wavering resolve when in the face of a stronger enemy or panic, and multiple aspects of what I just listed out apply to Boruto over the span of the 3 years since omnipotence, and some of those even apply from the Jura fight. It builds on what Sasuke told him, keep refining the skills I told you. Boruto at one point stopped running chakra through that sword. The sword is quite literally, again, a reflection of the user's soul. In those samurai stories, when the sword gets chipped or broken, it gets reforged and it gets put through a spiritual cleansing both for the user and the sword themselves. It is meant to signify the rebirth of a swordsman's will and spirit. Boruto's character has already done part of that. He's gone to meet with Momoshiki on a spiritual plane. He struck a deal for power. And now the sword is being reforged and transformed into something by Sumire, likely something related to ninja tech, and also something that is forbidden inside that scroll that Boruto gave her. So Kawaki is not the only person that's getting an upgrade to fight Jura. It looks like Boruto's on that path too. And if you care about the Boruto versus Kawaki eventual battle, this further fits into the narrative where the story has always been going with them two, and it continues to build on the theme of asking the question, where does science fit in a world of shinobi? Kawaki as a cyborg leans too heavily into science and the fastest way possible, but Boruto is following in the teachings of Sasuke and Naruto. Ninja tech was meant to be a supplement to your ninjutsu arsenal. It was never meant to replace it. That's what Boruto didn't understand in the first arc. It's meant to work in harmony. Like, let's use a real life example. I can take all these supplements I want, whether they be protein shakes, creatine, fat burners, testosterone boosters, whatever it is. But without eating the 2,500 to 2,700 calories, depending on the day, the 230 to 300 grams of protein, and the 300 to 400 grams of carbs I eat, and all the heavy weightlifting I do, it is pointless. Same if someone takes steroids, you still have to work out. You don't just take the steroids and just get magically ripped. Kawaki is basically the person who wants quick results without having to put the work in. Ikimoto is building on Boruto's character arc in a very subtle way, and he is potentially setting the stage for Sasuke's sword to eventually be Boruto's sword by the end of the series, possibly given that final cementation of Boruto inheriting Sasuke's Will of Fire officially. And that follows up what we said after chapter 5 drop, where I broke down the samurai connection to Boruto's broken sword and getting Sasuke's sword. Video will be linked in the description box, but being blunt, Ikimoto is stitching together multiple influences and plot lines while further building towards the divide in the mindset of Boruto and Kawaki before their eventual clash. I know there are a lot of people, they want this battle now. They want Jura taken out within the next 6 months. They want Boruto versus Kawaki to happen, but Ikimoto is adding layers to the arc to make that eventual clash hold more weight narratively. Think of this like a brisket. A brisket takes a while to cook, but it is tasty as hell. That's what's happening here. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on is the confirmation of why Sarada and Sumire are immune. In short, Ada says that because the two of them were in love with the Notsuki, Boruto, that she thought that they might have been immune for that reason. But then she thinks to herself a little bit more and says, well, that doesn't make any sense, because Sarada and Sumire aren't the only girls who are crazy about Boruto and Kawaki. Which, as I reminded a patron in the Patreon Discord server last night, I encourage you to reread Boruto's manga. There are scenes where girls have fawned over Boruto, flat out called him cute. And it's the same thing with Kawaki. You even have background characters that give them looks, the looks that women give to a guy that they're attracted to. So Ada's words should not come as a shock, but based on the stuff I'm seeing from more people than just my one patron I talked to last night in the server, there are people that are confused as to why she said that. That's why. Boruto and Kawaki, they're not unattractive guys. Ada, after thinking things through, realizes that she purposely left them immune to her power without realizing it. It was done subconsciously out of her desire to be friends with them. This is because of omnipotence, which, to clear this up, Ada's charm power is a byproduct of omnipotence. I still get people confused whenever I say that in a video, but that effect that makes people love slaves to her, that is omnipotence. Omnipotence is not just memory swap. The first time that she used it, it was her desire to be loved by people, and that was granted by omnipotence. That's what omnipotence does. It takes your desires and it makes them reality. Just as Kawaki's desire to switch places with Boruto, Ada's desperation to help him is why omnipotence was used to switch the lives of Boruto and Kawaki in everyone's mind. I know this might rub people the wrong way, and I've seen people pissed off over it. The same way that you have Sarada and Sumire not fighting, but we did discuss it here on the channel in a few videos, that the most likely outcome is that Sarada and Sumire versus Ada was never going to happen, because Ada would take Sarada up on that offer to be friends, and that Ada in character desires a true connection enough that she would forgive them for lying, because she's not foolish enough to throw away this opportunity, which is exactly what happened. I know that's not the answer a lot of people wanted, but it is consistent with the lore, and it's just a reminder. It's cool to speculate and to have water cooler discussions about all the different twists and turns the story can take between chapters. That's fun to do, but when something is explained in the series and it lines up with the narrative, do not get pissed off. Be better than Attack on Titan fans. Be better than My Hero Academia fans who went, my theory didn't come true. It was better. It made more sense. So this is automatically mid. Don't do that bullshit. Discuss the implications of the new information, but if it lines up with the narrative of the story, there's not much else to get pissed off over. If you're skeptical, then that's where the concept of payoff comes into play, where you let the author tell the story they want to, and you see what the payoff to said plot point is, which Ikimoto uses delayed payoff. So we won't get it in the next chapter or the next 2 or 3 chapters. With Boruto being a monthly manga, the full payoff to this might take years to get to, but in universe, it's only going to be a short period of time. There's more that takes place in this chapter, but I want to see if I can get better scans without the watermarks, and I have some questions regarding the translations. I trust Kaz. He is quickly improving in translations. He is getting up there, and Salad Bolts is literally in Japan, studying in Japan, and I prefer Salad Bolts translations over the officials, especially with the translator notes, because they add more context that makes you look at some of the official translations and go, wait a second, that don't sound right. But I just want to make sure I have everything lined up for the chapter review to give you guys the best quality possible in terms of the script. In the meantime, click here for this Naruto Explained video, or click here for my new Chainsman chapter review, which I strongly recommend, or click here for this Ace video from my Everything One Piece Explained channel.